Alrighty, we're going to go ahead and get started with our last speaker for the afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce Heather Vaughn. Heather is an HR specialist with Cactus Family Farms in Osceola, Iowa. Heather graduated from the University of Missouri with her degree in animal science and a major in Spanish. During her time at Mizzou, she had an internship in both swine and poultry production, where she focused on training and translating at the farm level. She now serves as the Human Resources Department at Cactus Family Farms, where she spearheads employee onboarding and training programs, as well as a company-wide language education program. Long-term, Heather's goal is to continue to break down the language barrier and overcome the cultural differences that agriculture is challenged with every day. This afternoon, Heather's talk is entitled Fostering a Healthy Workplace Culture. Heather, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Oh, there we go. Muy buenas tardes a todos. Me llamo Heather. Trabajo en la compañía Cactus Family Farms como especialista de recursos humanos y estoy aquí para platicar con ustedes un poquito sobre cómo crear un ambiente laboral saludable, especialmente en cuestión de nuestros empleados latinos. So I'm sure that might have caught some of you off guard, and I'm sorry if I shocked you a little bit, but I want to hear what are some of your thoughts after just that very brief introduction. What are some of your feelings running through your head right now? Thank you. I appreciate that. A decade of embarrassing myself, but we've gotten to this point. So anything else for our non-Spanish speakers? Anybody feeling any sort of way? Maybe a little bit of surprise. Yeah, maybe a little bit of overwhelmed. Absolutely. Maybe a little bit of confused. Those are all very valid feelings. And the reason why I wanted to start off that way and hopefully maybe catch you just a little off guard is that is the impression, that is the first experience that our employees have on day one of our farms. Those feelings of overwhelming, confusion, all those things, that's what they experience. So I want you to hold on to that thought as we move forward today. And I guess I need to pick up my clicker. I got a little ahead of myself. So my plan for today is to just kind of talk about how we can create that good work culture. And I think that Janae really teed it off great for me. I think our presentations are really going to complement each other if you were here for her great presentation right beforehand. But really, I want to talk about how we create that healthy work culture, that healthy work environment, especially for our Latino employees. So kind of to share my plan with you today, first I want to talk about what today's farm employee looks like in the ag industry, the pork industry of today. Then I want to talk a little bit more of a 30,000-foot overview, what is Latino work culture like? And then finally, I'm going to wrap it up with an employee survey that we did internally at Cactus. So that's kind of my plan for today. And I'm sure, I saw kind of what Janae did with her survey there at the beginning. I see a lot of you, do work in HR or are in management roles. But if you aren't in one of those roles or you don't interact with Latino employees on a daily basis, you might be wondering, why does this matter? How does it apply to me? Because I'm not on the farm on a regular basis, and I'm not interacting with these employees on a regular basis. But at the end of the day, I think this is important for all of us in the room in one way or another, because at the end of the day, this is the future of agriculture. And honestly, it's the present of agriculture too. Our industry does not look how it looked 50 years ago. It does not look how it looked even 20 years ago. And these employees are the foundation of our industry. And in my opinion, it's the direction that our industry is going. So it's really important that we are right there on the ball with these changes and ready to adapt and overcome the challenges that we are going to face with our industry changing the way that it is. So in addition to that, I think it's important because if a lot of you are not necessarily working with these employees on a daily basis, chances are you're serving as a resource or you're managing employees that are working with these employees. So you might be higher up on the chain of command, but if you can serve as a resource for those farm managers or those other employees that are facing these challenges, that's going to be really helpful for your team. And then lastly, I would just say, as we are all trying to develop our leadership skills, learn more about other cultures and countries, this is going to help all of us become better leaders as we move forward in the industry. So with that, let's dive right into it. First, I want to talk about today's farm employee. And I think a lot of this was very new to me when I started in the industry just here a couple of short years ago, and so I want to share it with you. But we really have, especially at Cactus, we have two main groups of employees that we see. And the first group I would say I call them our local employees. So those are our people, we're based out of Osceola, Iowa. So those are our people that are living in the Osceola area. They're coming in to apply in person. And I'd say at this point in time, those local applicants are looking right around 80% Hispanic Latino. And, we do have Americans come in on occasion, but at the end of the day, those are the minority at this point in time. So those Latino candidates that we have coming in to apply, they are from a variety of countries. We mainly see Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, but pretty much all over Central America is what we see there. And with that, a lot of the time, they have little formal education. So we're looking at maybe an 8th grade education, maybe a high school education, but usually not very much beyond that. And that's something that we have to keep in mind with these employees. In addition to that, a lot of the times they have no prior experience in pigs. And sometimes I've seen a lot of employees, they may never have even seen a pig in real life before coming to apply to work at our companies. And that's perfectly okay. We start from ground zero a lot of the time with a lot of people, but we have to keep that in mind. And then lastly, I would say when we're working with these different Central American countries, a lot of them speak traditional indigenous languages as well as Spanish. And sometimes Spanish isn't their first language. It could be a second or a third language. And so with that being said, in a combination of it not being their first language and then not having maybe as much formal education as your average American employee, this leads to a little lack of confidence at times when it comes to especially reading and writing in Spanish. A lot of the times their spoken Spanish is great. They can communicate and understand just fine. But if you're trying to get them to read a piece of paper, even if it's in Spanish, that could be something that we struggle with. And so that's good just to keep in mind. On the other side of that coin, we really have a completely different pool of applicants. Even though you might look at this group of Latino employees and think, they're all the same, that's really not the case. And I know we talked about this a little bit in our last talk, but we also have our visa applicants. And Cactus is very similar to what Pig Hill was talking about. At this point in time, we're exclusively using the TN visa in our hiring process. And some of the specifications with that visa is that those visa applicants must be either from Canada or Mexico because it's through the NAFTA agreement that we have this visa option. In our case, we have yet to hire a Canadian to work on our farms, so at this point in time, 100% Mexico is where those employees are coming from. Another specification to the TN visa is that they have to have some level of an advanced degree, so minimum bachelor's, but a lot of the time they have master's degrees or something beyond that as well. And it has to be in a related field, so a lot of the time we're looking at animal science or veterinary science bachelor's degrees. It could be in agronomy or in ag engineering, biology, something related to agriculture. And then in addition to that, they are also fluent in Spanish coming from Mexico. I have yet to have an employee that hasn't been. And then in addition to that, they have various levels of English on top of speaking Spanish. Now, if you can think about it for us, it's pretty similar when we go to college or even in high school, we're required to take a foreign language. It's usually the same in Mexico. They have to take some sort of English class or foreign language class. But as you all know, just because you took the class in high school or college doesn't mean you necessarily speak that language. So with that being said, there's going to be some different levels of English here. And so as you can see, even though these are all, for the most part, going to be Latino employees, very different categories of employees that we're working with. And that's kind of what we have to keep in mind when we move forward. So with that being said, I want to talk about Latino work culture kind of from a 30,000-foot view. And I'm sure most of you have figured it out by now, but I am not Latino myself. I've worked with these folks for a lot of years and have a lot of respect for them and their culture. But, kind of speaking as an outsider looking in, and also recognizing that not every Latino is going to fit into this category. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. That's my disclaimer. So to start off with, if you don't remember anything else from this presentation, I think one of the most important things, and Janae hit on this a little bit too, is that in the Latino work culture, they are going to be relationship-oriented and not task-oriented. And that is pretty different from the mindset that we take as Americans working in the American workforce. and that's why it's important. So not to say that we don't find the relationship important or that they don't find the task important. That's not what it is. What it is that, in our mindset, I think to myself, when I start this job, I'm going to focus on the task, I'm going to work well with my team, and as a result or a byproduct of working on this task with others, I'm going to develop the relationship with them. So the relationship is the byproduct of the task. For our Latino employees, it's a little bit in the reverse. They see it as, the relationship is essential. It's an essential ingredient, if you will, to accomplishing that task and doing it efficiently and as effectively as possible. So kind of just a different mindset there. In addition to that, as a whole, we see them focusing more on collectivism instead of individualism. And all that really means to say is that at the end of the day, the team and the team's needs are going to come first. And their individual needs a lot of the time are going to come second. And that's usually pretty different from our American culture as well. And that's not to say that we're selfish or we care more about ourselves and they don't care about themselves. That's not it at all. But at the end of the day, they're going to think about those team needs and the team well-being before they're thinking about their individual needs. And a good example of that would be, when I was spending my time on the sow farm working with other employees, that week I was in the breeding department. And, we had finished up for the day. I had the option to leave an hour early that day because all my responsibilities were done. I had already put in some extra hours earlier in the week, so, I was ready to go home, shower out, and be done. And, that's thinking about my needs, right? And I've done my responsibilities 100%. I'm not being a bad employee by leaving early because I'm done. But in the Latino employee mindset, their first thought might be, well, what if I go over to the breeding, the farrowing department and I help them? I don't get to leave an hour early, but maybe our whole team could leave 10 minutes early. So that's kind of the mindset there, if that helps you think about it at all. And I would say at the end of the day, that collective mindset, that team-oriented thinking is going to be a great benefit for your farm. Where it can get us into trouble is when those employees see that not everyone is thinking about the team first. So if they are going out of their way to put the team's needs first, go above and beyond to support everyone else, and they aren't getting that same level of support back from the rest of the team, there gets to be this very strong sense of justice, and they get frustrated. And rightfully so, I would say. And so that's where we can get into some problems. And I'm sure a lot of you dealing with employee relations issues have seen this before, where they get frustrated because they are going above and beyond and they feel that other members of the team are not pulling their weight. So it can be a help or a hindrance in certain situations, but I think overall that mindset is really helpful to the farm. So next we have this idea of being able to learn better through verbal instruction. And I think that mainly comes from, if you think back to the last slide, we've got varying levels of Spanish and English language ability, and on top of that, varying levels of comfort with reading and writing, depending on the education level of that individual. So with that being said, if we can choose to do our trainings or our surveys or whatever that is in a verbal or a conversational form instead of just pencil and paper, we're going to be able to get to those employees and really get their true thoughts and feelings a lot more effectively than we could if it was just a written training or something along those lines. And then in addition to that, I think this is true for everybody. If we have the option for hands-on activity, hands-on training, all of us in the room are going to learn a lot better if we have the opportunity to get our hands dirty and really practice whatever it is that we're trying to work on. The next one I think is really important, and I didn't realize it when I started, but I soon came to understand that a lot of our employees, and keep in mind these are usually first-generation immigrants, they're coming here and they are unsure about their employee rights in the United States. And this is really important because at the end of the day, this job is everything for them. They've sacrificed a lot to be here, whether it's on a visa or just being a local applicant. They've sacrificed a lot to be in the United States. Some of them come from difficult backgrounds, and it's just important to keep in mind that they come here. This job is everything to them. And a lot of the times, they've told me, I'm terrified to lose my job. I don't want to make any mistakes because I want to keep my job. It's really important to me. And I think I can relate to that. I think we can all relate to how important our jobs are. But at the end of the day, if they are unsure about the laws here and don't know what their rights are, that can lead to a lot of issues in our farms, whether it's just as simple as, I have a great idea that I want to share with our manager, but I don't know what I'm allowed to talk to him about, what I'm allowed to say, or if it'll come off as a complaint and then I get fired. Or it could be things that are a lot more serious, like, do I report the harassment? Do I report the safety violation or the injury that happened? I don't know because I don't want to lose my job. And so that's where we run into things where maybe those employees aren't going to be as upfront and honest with us as they would be if they understood their rights, if we advocated for them a little bit more, and that's why it's important. And then lastly, I'd say as a broad generalization, these employees are going to be very open about their pay. And this is mainly just because in the majority of Latino culture, it's not a very taboo subject. And these communities are pretty tight-knit. As first-generation immigrants, they're usually pretty tight-knit. And so they will talk about their pay on and off the farm. And with that being said, it's important that if there are discrepancies in pay between employees on the same level at the farm, that we can justify that or have some sort of reasoning. Because at the end of the day, I know it's happened to me where they come and they're like, hey, what's going on here? And you've got to have something that you can support that decision with so that they don't find any issues there. So with that being said, the last portion of my talk that I really want to focus on is an internal survey that we did with our employees. So I've done a talk like this, a pretty similar talk to this a couple times in the past, just sharing my opinions and my ideas of best practices working with Latino employees. But this time I decided to take a different spin on it, and I actually talked with our Latino employees to see what they thought. Because at the end of the day, my opinions are great and everything, but I think when we're talking about stuff like this, their opinions are a lot more valid and more useful for you all. So that's what I did. I spoke with about 10 employees at our company, men and women, a variety of ages. The majority of them do have our TN visa. To give you just a little bit of background. And the first question I asked them was, what should managers do to work well with Latino employees? And this is some of the feedback that I got. And I paraphrased this just to make it look nice on the slide. But the first thing, what the majority of them told me was treat all employees the same. And I think this is something that we all know, but sometimes it's harder to execute than it is, just to think about. So that's regardless of race, gender, or relationship, if you're related to somebody at the farm or something like that. They just want to be treated the same. And I think that goes back to that collective, team-oriented mindset. If we notice people on the team that are being treated better or, treated worse or getting special treatment, not having to work as much, they're going to really take that to heart. The next thing they said was meet us in the middle, and this was another one that almost everybody said. And basically what they meant by that was, we're here in the U.S., we want to learn your culture, we want to learn English, but at the same time, the best managers that we've worked with are the ones that choose to meet us in the middle. Maybe they're not fluent in Spanish, but they're trying, they've learned a few words. When they're teaching us about their customs and cultures, they're asking questions in return. And it becomes this mutual space where we are both learning and teaching the other person about that culture. The next thing they said was create an environment where we can ask questions. And I think that goes back to being unsure about employee rights. If we can create that environment when they come on the farm, especially in the beginning, where they feel comfortable coming to us with their questions and concerns, we can talk about those things that may be a little bit touchy subjects or uncomfortable to talk about. If we can create that environment, they're going to do a lot better and feel a lot more comfortable with us. And I honestly think that's true for all employees, right? If our managers are approachable and friendly and helpful, we are going to succeed in our roles and we're going to learn a lot quicker than we would if we didn't feel like we could come to that person to talk to them. Next, they said, and I think this one's a no-brainer, but use an interpreter or a translator as much as you can. And I think, this is something that we try to do a lot of the times when we're doing, big official things on the farms. But even if we could do it, if those managers could try to do it, even when they're just visiting the farm for a checkup or an audit or something like that, to try to build that relationship with those employees as much as possible keep in mind that relationship-oriented, not just task-oriented. So if we can use that translator or that interpreter to build that relationship, that's going to go a long way. And the other feedback I got from them was, if we have the option for an interpreter, that's great. We're not going to complain, but even better if it's a neutral interpreter. So they said, it's great to have bilingual people on the farm that we can use, but at the end of the day, if they're on the farm day in and day out, they're bringing their own personal thoughts, opinions, and biases into that conversation when they translate. So if they're trying to share a concern that's going on, or if the manager's trying to, give a training or something, if that translator's somebody on the farm, a lot of the time maybe not everything is getting translated word for word, and those opinions are coming across exactly the way that person wants them to. So if that's an option, I think that's a great option, and honestly, that's what I end up doing in my role a lot of the times, is coming in as that neutral interpreter on the farms. And I think both the managers and the employees really appreciate having somebody like that to help them communicate. And then lastly, they said, have patience with us. I want you to think back, to that very beginning when I started speaking Spanish at you a million miles an hour, a little bit of, deer in the headlights to some extent. And that's the same reaction our employees are going to have, especially because we are all guilty of speaking at them too fast. So if we can slow it down a little bit, give them time to understand and formulate a response, because sometimes it takes us a minute to come up with that word we're looking for or whatever else. If we can have patience with them in that process and don't, get a response out of them right away, give them time to process, we're going to get a lot further and get a lot more thorough and honest answers out of them when they don't feel rushed. And then lastly, they said, have a conversation with us. And this just goes back to that relationship-oriented mindset. And they said, Heather, sometimes our managers will be around us, and I know they don't speak Spanish, but they walk by us in the hallway, and they don't even smile. They don't even wave. We know they don't speak Spanish, but they could at least say hola or hello or act like they noticed that we were there or something. Even if it's not a full-on conversation, you can still try your best to have that communication, use those nonverbal communication skills, and build that relationship, even if between the two of you, you maybe have 20 words combined of English and Spanish. So just doing your best to make that conversation and build that relationship goes a long way. The next question I asked them was, what should managers not do to work well with Latino employees? And some of the responses I got were pretty similar to before, but they said, don't put us all in the same group. And I know that goes against to what I'm doing right now because I have to group them up to be able to talk about how to work with them. But at the same time, they said, we're not all from the same culture. We're not all from the same country. And I think that's true, too. If we took a survey from around the room, I'm from Missouri. If I'm in a group with somebody from California, Texas, and New York, even though we're all Americans, we have very different cultures. And so that's important to keep in mind, that it's not always going to be the same. And then they said, don't treat us differently than other employees. And that goes back to this team-oriented mindset. I had one employee that said, Heather, I've worked at 3 different pig companies. The first one that I worked at, I hadn't even been on the farm for a month. And there was an American employee that told the manager, I don't want to do that job. It's unsafe. I don't feel good doing it. And the manager said, okay, fair enough. Gabrielle, you go do that job instead. And he's like over here like, what the heck? I'm happy to do that job. That's not a problem. I'm willing to do all the jobs on the farm. That's why I was hired. But at the end of the day, I want to receive the same treatment and go through the same thing as everybody else. And we should all have to take turns doing that job. So just that mindset is equal treatment across the board. Then the next one, and I think this is super important, is that we cannot assume that they can't understand what we're saying in English. So even though they might not feel super comfortable speaking English, a lot of the time they understand more than we give them credit for. And at the end of the day, even if I'm talking about somebody in front of them, whether I'm saying good or bad things or neutral things, if they're sitting there trying to figure out what I'm saying, they heard their name, and they don't know what else it is, they can read that situation completely different. Even if I didn't say a single bad thing about them, if that was the impression they got from the conversation, they leave with a bitter taste in their mouth, and that can lead to a lot of misunderstandings. So We just have to be really careful about that because we don't want anybody to get the wrong idea. And then the next one they said was, don't be scared of us. And when my employee said that to me, I asked her, I was like, can you elaborate on that or give me an example because I don't know what you mean. And she gave me a great example, and I honestly would never have thought of this in a million years, but she said, Heather, we had our safety manager come in last week and do a training at the farm, and he comes in, once a month, every other month to do safety trainings. And he came in, we were all sitting there eating lunch. He brought in Casey's Pizza for all of us. We offered for him to sit and eat lunch with us. We offered to share our food, or even if he just wanted to eat some of the pizza that he brought for us. And he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't sit down. He didn't eat any of the pizza or anything that we offered him. And she said he was very kind of off-putting. He acted like we were scared. And she said, I thought to myself, we're not going to rob you. We're not going to bite. But he didn't want anything to do with us. He wanted to be in and out and not do anything. And that really surprised me. And I told her, I was like, in his mindset, he was probably just trying to be professional. He probably had no idea that that's how he was coming off. He probably thought, I don't want to eat their lunch. That's their food that they brought and paid for. I don't need to do anything like that. I'm going to get my safety training done, and I'm going to go about my day. But in their mindset, when you're thinking relationship-oriented, not task-oriented, and those kinds of things, he came off cold. And even though that was not his approach at all, that was not his intention, that's how they read that situation. And that really spoke with me because I would have never thought of that in a million years. So the last question I asked them was, if you could tell an American one thing, whether it's, your American manager or just some random person on the street, if you could tell them one thing, what would it be? And the overwhelming answer that I got was, we are here to make a living. And I think that stems from this American mindset at times where I've heard people say, they're here stealing our jobs or whatever. And usually when I hear that, I usually say to them, feel free to come and sit in the office with me any day you want, because I guarantee you, if we have 20 people coming to the office to apply, maybe one of them will be an American. We are not stealing jobs from anybody. And that's what they said, we're here to make a living. We're not here to steal anybody's job. We're not here to prove that we're better than anybody else. We just want to make a living and support our families. Next, they said, our jobs and our family are everything. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about, being unsure of their rights and stuff like that. When they come to this country to work on our farms, they're doing that to support their families. Their families are number one, but that job is number two because it allows them to support their families. And I think that's true for all of us. But at the end of the day, they hold a lot more value in that job because, especially for our employees with a visa, they have worked very hard to get to this point, to get that college degree, to come here and do the job that they are doing. And it's hard for us to put it into perspective sometime, but it's really important. Can I get a show of hands in here? Who in here has any sort of college degree or advanced education? Okay, pretty much everybody. And so I want you to think about this. If we put it in the perspective of our TN visa employees that have a bachelor's or a master's degree in some ag-related field, a lot of them with their veterinary science degree are practicing veterinarians in Mexico. So if we put ourselves in their shoes, I think to myself, how much money would it take, or how bad would the situation here in the U.S. have to get before I would go to a different country where they spoke a different language, where I was away from my family and everything that I'd known my whole life, to do a job that I was way overqualified for and that was not mentally stimulating whatsoever. And if we put it in that kind of a mindset, how far would it have to go for us to do something like that? It makes you take a step back, and it really puts you in that humbling position. That's exactly what these people have done. They've chosen to leave their more prestigious jobs back in their home countries to come here and work on our farms to make better money and support their families. And they've made a ton of sacrifices to get to that point. So if we can keep that in mind, it's going to really help us with our interactions with them. Next, they said English is hard. And we actually offer an education program at the company where I teach free Spanish and English classes for any of our employees that want to work on their language skills. So Spanish for English speakers and English for Spanish speakers. But they said, English is really hard to learn. We're doing the best that we can, but we do appreciate all the patience that all of the English speakers and all the managers have with us, because at the end of the day, it's tough, especially when you have an advanced college degree, you're highly educated. I think all of us in the room know how that feels, where we don't want to sound stupid, and they don't want to sound stupid in English either. And I know for me personally, that was a big fear that I had to get over when I was learning Spanish is, I'm going to make mistakes, and it's okay. And I'm not going to sound like the smartest person in the room all the time because this isn't my first language. And they're going through that with the same insecurities too. So if we can have patience with them and understand that, that goes a long way. And then lastly, they just said, we can support each other mutually. And I kind of already hit on that, but just building that two-way street where we're both working on learning the other person's culture and maybe even the other person's language, to bridge that gap together. I think a lot of people have the mindset where they're coming to our country, they need to learn our customs, our culture, and yeah, that's great, and I know that they want to, but at the end of the day, if that can be a two-way street, it's going to work a lot better for everybody. So just kind of some of my closing points. Like I said, focus on the relationship. Just like with all of our employees, that's going to be the most important part. If we can build that relationship with them, it's a lot easier with our American employees to get to know them and build that relationship because we share the same language. But even with that language barrier, it goes a long way if we can make an effort to do that with our Latino employees as well. Next, put yourself in their shoes, and I know we've reflected about that throughout this whole presentation, but if we can take that extra minute to think about where they're coming from, the sacrifices that they've made, and all those kinds of things, we're going to go a lot further just with all of our employees. Empathy is going to be key. Next, like we said, create that environment of mutual learning. We know that no one culture is better than the other, and if we can make this a mutual environment where we're both teaching and learning at the same time, that goes a long way. And then lastly, I think one of the most important things is, as leaders in our companies, if we can invest in those people that are bridging those gaps on our farm, that are creating that company culture that we want, that are bringing together two very different groups of employees that we have, both Americans and Latinos and everything, if we can identify those people and help to develop them, support them, promote them, whatever that looks like, so that we can continue making that progress in our industry and in our company, that is going to be super important as we move forward and as the industry continues to change. So with that, I want to just leave you with a quote that my boss says all the time: we can do more together than we can alone. And I think that's the mindset that we have to take in to every single one of these interactions that we have. So thank you guys so much for your attention, and I'll take any questions at this point in time. Yes. I would say that, and to be completely transparent with you, I do very little in the visa process. My boss, Yolanda, is the one that's handling the visa process. And then when those employees are ready to come to the U.S. and start on the farms and all that, that's kind of where I start to take over. But I would say just from seeing all the struggles that she's gone through in learning this process and everything, it would be having some more consistency. And I know that's just a government thing in general, but you have, your consulate in Mexico telling you one thing, you have your embassy telling you another thing, your state government's telling you one thing, your federal, nobody can seem to agree on a lot of these things. We know what the specifications are, what the visa are, but a lot of these rules and loopholes, nobody can seem to agree, and that's where it seems like every visa case seems to be a little bit different. And one thing that worked last week at the consulate isn't going to work this week. And so whatever we can do to find some more consistency, to get some more training for people throughout our industry so that they know what's going on, so that they can be more educated on the visa options that we have and how we can actually use those to our advantage to help our industry, in my opinion, would be huge. Any other questions? Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Absolutely. That's a great question. That's a good question. So far, we have yet to see a whole lot of people. What's interesting is that I think that second generation or that kind of in-between culture is starting to move more into our management positions because they do understand both sides. For example, my boss is a great example of that. She has dual citizenship, born in Mexico, has lived in the U.S. for almost her entire life. And, you know, those bilingual skills, understanding both sides of the culture. And I think that's where really it comes down to is finding those people, hiring those people, empowering them to grow in our company and kind of be those advocates for both sides, because I think, you know, to this day, I'm still learning a lot about Latino culture, and I think I will be learning until the day that I die, but she just understands both sides so perfectly and can think in both styles at the same time, and I marvel at that. So I don't know, other than just exposing our managers to more people in that in-between culture that I think serve as the perfect advocate in between our two groups of employees. That's really the best thing that I can think of is trying to get more people on board with that in-between culture and that second generation and double understanding, if you will, because they're going to be the ones that bridge the gap in our company, in our industry. And honestly, at the end of the day, if we're going to do that, I think it all goes back to how we're working with those first generation employees now, because at the end of the day, if their parents hated working on the farms, if they did not enjoy their jobs, if they think that their children should grow up and do something completely different than that, then those second generation people that are really going to bridge those gaps in our industry aren't going to want to come back to the farm or just back to the industry in general, you know? So that's something that we really have to think about moving forward. I don't know if that quite answered your question there, but.
Well, it's something that is present, right?
Yes.
You're looking at it from the standpoint that we're in America, we speak English, this is our culture.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, we're changing. Our demographics are changing, our culture is changing. So we're creating new culture
Mm-hmm.
pretty much every day. How do you compare both sides, or as many sides against another? We're very balanced.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just that bridging of the cultures and coming together to create something that's kind of an interesting in-between and a mix of the two, as we do that, it's going to become easier and easier to bridge those gaps and to teach Americans that maybe have never interacted with those kind of cultures a little bit more about both sides. So that's a great question. Thank you. Anybody else?
Any other questions for Heather?
Awesome. Well,
If
thank you
not,
guys so much.
Let's thank her one more time.